At a time where it feels like the entire world is on pause, it's almost comforting to know that nothing can stop the forward march of fashion. In 2020, play suits are out and hazmat suits are in. Say goodbye to festival hot pants and say hello to sweatpants and antibacterial gloves. But the hottest new trend for this year is unmistakably the mask. A fashion phenomenon that has spread around the world like, something that spreads really fast. But like most fashion trends, masks are nothing new. Throughout time, humans have been hiding their hideous mugs behind an enormous assortment of fancy face gloves. So today we'll be looking at the history of masks, and together, maybe we can find the right mask for you. But first, where did masks come from? Well, it turns out humans have been seeking to replace their face since early antiquity. These stony-faced ghouls of eternal surprise are considered to be the oldest surviving masks in the world. Discovered in the Judean hills of modern-day Israel, archaeologists believe they are over 9,000 years old.
What, 9,000?
While these masks would have made great decoration for someone's cave wall, they likely had a ceremonial use. Which brings us to our first kind of mask. Are you feeling lonely? Tired of all those jittery Zoom hangouts and the weirdly intimate conversations you're now having with household items? Then perhaps you should consider the purchase of a ceremonial mask, which you can use to communicate with the souls of the dead. In ancient Rome, it was traditional for wealthy families to make masks of their recently deceased family members. And at funerals, professional actors would wear the face of the beloved corpse and reenact moments from their life. Tribal cultures in West Africa have been crafting these elaborate neck-snapping masks of spiritual heaviness for centuries. And they were used in ceremonies where the wearer was supposed to lose their own identity and embody the spirit of a long dead and presumably very ugly ancestor. But if you're in the market for a ceremonial mask, then my personal recommendation has to be the Japanese Hannya mask. Look at it. Isn't it hideous? The mask has its origins in No theatre, downbeat and butt-numbingly long Japanese plays that are all about the destructive nature of human desire, and they all end in a jaunty little dance number. The Hannya mask is so perfectly grotesque that its child-eating smile is still seen everywhere in Japanese culture. From classic Japanese horror movies to the backs of fearsome Yakuza warriors. That shit is rad. No masks are considered to be the height of Japanese craftsmanship, which is why I recommend getting a cheap plastic knockoff, because the real ones are expensive. The Hannya mask is lightweight, stylish, and a great way to make sure people maintain their goddamn social distance from you. The Hannya mask. Great mask. 8 out of 10. However, you're probably less interested in communicating with your worm food relatives and more interested in a mask that will prevent you from joining them, in which case, you're going to want a protective mask. This mustachioed metal mask is the face section of the Sutton Hoo helmet. This rusty rustic nose squasher was probably owned by a 7th century king of East Anglia, and it had the dual function of intimidating his enemies and protecting his face meat from their pointed sticks. But as time moved on, humans realised that there were plenty of non-pointy things to be scared of, and masks developed to meet our anxieties. There's scuba masks, a favourite among fish fondlers and people suffering from the bends. There's the gas mask, used to keep dangerous gases out and occasionally to keep delicious gases in. And then of course, there's the face mask. Once the reserve of medical professionals and Asian people in airports, face masks are now so mainstream that they're currently mandated by the state. So the face mask is pretty clutch right now. But I know what you guys are thinking. You're sick of thinking about that thing that we all can't stop thinking about. So my next recommendation for a mask is something a little more retro, a little more vintage. Plague Doctor chic was the hottest look to come out of 17th century disease-ridden Milan. This macabre bird costume was designed by a man named Charles Delorme as a sort of armour to the plague. The waxed coat and mask were meant to prevent disease reaching the body, and the wide-brimmed hat was a sign of a medical man. And the special cane that they all had was used to poke gross stuff. But these pigeon-faced harbingers of death weren't actually doctors. They were hired to count and clear corpse piles once the real doctors had visited and presumably joined the human Jenga jumble. And I know what you're all thinking. Of course, the important question is why? Why did they have a beak? And the answer is science. During the 17th century and beyond, a prevailing medical belief was miasma theory, an idea that suggested disease was spread through what they called bad air, which was identifiable through its terrible stink. And the natural extension of this smell logic was that if bad stinks make you sick, then good stinks could make you better. That's why plague doctors would stuff their beaks full of the dankest herbs known to man, constantly inhaling those tasty terpenes and occasionally setting them alight like they were wearing some kind of beaky bong. Plague doctors were respected and paid handsomely for their work, which was just as well, as they had the life expectancy of an exotic animal in a Wuhan wet market. Plague Doctor bird masks. 7 out of 10. Decent mask. But hey, maybe you're in the market for a mask that doesn't remind you of the grim spectre of your inevitable demise, in which case, you're going to want a party mask. As far back as ancient Greece, drunks, hedonists, and the sexually disturbed have been using masks to transcend social norms. The Dionysius wine cult would wear masks during mysterious rituals where ordinary rank and class were suspended, and everyone got really shit-faced. During the Renaissance, the Carnival of Venice served as an excuse for rich weirdos to don creepy white masks and get away with violently assaulting peasants. And today, it still exists as a way for rich weirdos to don creepy, elaborate masks and assault the eyes of every tourist who's visiting Venice that weekend. But there's no country that loves a party mask more than Mexico, also known as America's pants. Of course, there's the world-famous Day of the Dead, a family-friendly holiday where people wear the inside of their face on the outside. But if you really want to stand out from the crowd that you shouldn't be standing in this season, then I'd recommend a luchador mask. The wrestlers of Lucha Libre have been twisting each other into churros since the early 20th century. They started wearing masks in the 1930s, and the subsequent tradition of undressing your opponent's head really added some much-needed erotic undertones to the sport. And nobody wore the mask better than one man. A man named El Santo. El Santo's reign coincided with the mid-century golden age of Lucha Libre. Beloved by his country, he came to prominence just as these lycra-clad slapdowns were being televised. Throughout a career that lasted more than 50 years, he would never remove his signature silver mask in public. El Santo embraced the mask, and his nation embraced him. He was also the star of over 50 films where he fought vampires, zombies, Frankenstein's daughter, Martians, the Diabolical Brain, the Infernal Brain, and whatever the fuck this was supposed to be. In a final retirement gesture to a nation of fans, El Santo briefly revealed his face during this television interview, and with the timing of a true showman, he promptly died a week later. Barely anyone knew his real name, yet his funeral was the largest in Mexico's history, and he was buried in the silver mask that won him his nation's heart. Luchador masks, 10 out of 10, would recommend to a friend. When many people think of masks, they think of superheroes and their secret identities. But superheroes only exist in fiction. And on this channel, fiction's just a $5 word for fancy lies. In this unrelenting nightmare that we call reality, people who wear masks are generally up to no good and are probably into weird sex stuff. No judgment, I'm just saying it's likely. If someone wears a mask to hide their identity, especially in a group, they're probably doing or saying something that they don't have the cojones to do with their own flesh facade. And there's an idea. Okay, let's start with Antifa, a left-ish protest group that like to decry the woes of capitalism by smashing windows, setting fires, and generally causing chaos that people who fucking work for a living will have to clean up. Take that, the man! Then there's Pussy Riot, or as I like to call them, Queef Complaint. A load of attention-hungry agitators who commit petty crimes to boost their album sales. Thanks for the publicity, Amnesty International, but aren't there some war crimes you should be looking into? Then there's Banksy. Actually, Banksy doesn't wear a mask, but I still got one in the chamber. Banksy is a pompous art school wanker whose real name is Robin Gunningham. Robbie Boy uses his fake anonymity to puff up his anti-establishment credentials, all the while selling his work for millions to Russian oligarchs. And then there's Anonymous. Let's talk about Anonymous. Some people say that they're a load of incel basement-dwelling keyboard coomers. Not me, of course, because I'm scared of them. But they inspired the knobheads who went and did the Million Mask March, an insufferable act of mass cosplay disguised as some vague political statement, all while wearing masks that were produced on a poverty wage assembly line somewhere outside Rio. And then there's Daft Punk, who... Actually, I kind of like Daft Punk. Their shiny robot masks are cool. But they're the exception that proves the rule. You know, the more I think about it, the more I realise that all these elaborate masks are kind of lame. In reality, people who wear masks are rarely found hanging on the street fighting crime, and are more likely to be found hanging in a hotel closet after some furious wanking accident. No, as with most fashion, it pays to keep things simple. If a mask covers your face and nose, then it's a winner. Face masks, 10 out of 10.